Hello friends, my name is David, and today I'm sharing with you two very creepy and scary stories that will send shivers down your spine. The Grandparent Tower building, the city of dreams, Mumbai, India, where people come in droves to earn money and become famous, and because of this, there is often a lot of competition for places to stay. But in this city, there is also a house where, even if someone offers money up front, perhaps no one would want to live there. A flat where death looms over your head. So what about Grandparent Towers, which is considered one of the most haunted places in India? Built in 1975, these apartment towers, although very luxurious and beautiful, have an equally terrifying story attached to them. Neha, 27 years old, left her entire family in Pune and came to stay at her friend Manavi's flat 2 months ago. Manavi used to live alone in a flat on the 3rd floor of the building. Neha had recently gone through a divorce, which left her very distressed. Her business was suffering losses, so she decided to come to Mumbai and spend some time with her friends. Manavi was a radiologist and had night shifts, so Neha often found herself alone in the flat at night. One night around 12:30, Neha went out of her building to smoke a cigarette. When her gaze suddenly fell on the balcony of the 8th floor of the adjacent towers, she saw a very beautiful woman standing there. At first, she was looking down from the balcony attentively, but when she felt Neha was watching her, she started looking at Neha. Neha paused there and tried to avoid eye contact, but the woman was now looking at Neha. Neha looked up and saw the woman again, but this time she felt something strange. It was as if a heavy weight had settled in her heart. Tears welled up in her eyes. She blinked back the tears, and when she looked towards the 8th floor again, no one was there. This sequence began to repeat daily. Neha would stand outside the balcony of this flat every night, staring into space, tears streaming down her face. Suddenly, Neha's health deteriorated. Her entire body was becoming dry, and her face started to turn pale. One day, Manavi decided to take a few days off work and spend time with Neha. Manavi began showing Neha around all the famous places in Mumbai, but Neha's behavior was very strange the whole time, and she didn't react to anything. As the night approached, Manavi took her to party at a club. However, suddenly something happened to Neha that made Manavi anxious. Neha started having sudden seizures. Neha was having such episodes that her whole body was trembling, and then she suddenly fell to the ground. Similarly, Manavi splashed water on Neha's face. Only then did Neha become normal. After that, both returned to the flat, freshened up, and went to sleep. Manavi had decided to take Neha to a therapist the next morning, but late that night, Neha woke up and went straight out of her flat. While walking, Neha stood under the 3rd building of Grandparent Towers and started looking towards the 8th floor. As she looked, Neha walked into the building. She saw that there was garbage scattered on this floor, as if no one had been there for many years. She stopped at the door and was just looking at the lock when suddenly the door of that apartment opened by itself. Neha stood there in astonishment. A terrible stench was emanating from the apartment. Just then, another woman called out to her. When she looked up, it was the same woman she saw every day. The woman was standing on the balcony of that flat. Smiling, she gestured for Neha to come closer. Neha, seeing this, went inside the flat. She was about to reach the balcony when suddenly the woman vanished from there, and Neha started running straight back towards the door. But the door was now locked. Neha started screaming loudly, pounding on the door, but her voice didn't reach anyone. Then she felt as if someone was standing behind her. She turned around, and her eyes widened in fear. The same woman was standing in front of her, but there was a very long and sinister smile on her face, yet tears were also coming from her eyes. Her hair was completely disheveled, and her skin was completely wrinkled. As she looked around, one by one, many deceased souls began to appear in that flat. They all seemed to be moving towards Neha. All those souls looked very sad. Seeing them all, Neha suddenly felt very heavy-hearted, and tears started flowing from her eyes. She began to feel extremely depressed. One by one, she climbed onto the balcony and started jumping from there, and Neha also followed them, jumping from the same balcony when her turn came. Meanwhile, Manavi received a phone call that made her legs go weak. It was a call from a hospital. Neha was admitted to that hospital in critical condition because she had attempted to take her own life by jumping from the 8th floor of Grandparent Towers. Manavi was stunned to hear this. She couldn't understand how Neha went to that flat on the 8th floor because the flight had been closed for years. The next day, when Neha regained consciousness, she recounted the entire incident to Manavi. But then, that night, Neha lost her life. Manavi was shattered by Neha's death, and then a man residing in the Grandparent Towers told her something that sent shivers down Manavi's spine. He told Manavi that the 8th floor of the 3rd building of Grandparent Towers is considered haunted. Countless people have committed suicide from that floor, but all those who committed suicide were under immense stress. So far, no one has been able to understand whether the flat on the 8th floor is actually haunted or if those people were genuinely distressed with their lives. Whatever happened with Neha remains a mystery to this day, and the mystery of the deaths of all those people who committed suicide from the 8th floor remains unsolved as well. Now, another story. You might have heard it somewhere, but after listening to this horror story, maybe you'll never buy a doll again. This story is based on the true story of the world's most popular horror legend, Annabelle doll. In 1970, when nursing student Donna was studying, her mom gifted her an antique doll. Donna had always been fond of toys since childhood, so even though she was in college, she liked to play with dolls. During her nursing studies, Donna lived in an apartment with her roommate Angie. Both Donna and her mom were very happy with the gift. She used to talk a lot to that doll from college and would even put it to sleep on her bed. A few days later, once when she returned from college, Donna saw her doll lying on the sofa outside. But as far as she remembered, she had left the doll in her bedroom on her bed. When Donna told Angie about this, Angie said she had noticed it too. The doll moves from one place to another on its own. Since that day, both of them started paying close attention to the movements of that doll. Whenever they came home, the position of the doll had changed. Before going to college, they would leave the doll in a room, and upon returning to check, it would be in a different room altogether. Gradually, this phenomenon escalated, and after a few days, these incidents became even more frightening. One night, Donna placed the doll on her room chair and went to sleep on her bed. Late at night, she heard some noises that disturbed her sleep. When she opened her eyes slightly, it felt as if the doll had turned its neck. Both of them were suddenly filled with fear from its staring eyes. She immediately got up, placed the doll back on the sofa, and went back to sleep. A few days later, unusual incidents started increasing in the house. When they returned from college, they saw many papers scattered in the apartment corridor, on which was written in a child's handwriting, "Help me." At the end of the corridor was a doll, which was propped against the door of the room. Both were quite startled after reading the papers. As they passed by that doll, its eyes remained wide open. Blood stained its face, and its hair was matted with blood. Immediately after the incident, they called for the priest of the church, who explained that the doll was possessed, meaning it had a soul inside. When the priest conversed with that soul, it revealed that it was a 7-year-old girl named Annabelle Higgins, and she died in a road accident beneath Donna and Angie's apartment. Annabelle also expressed feeling safe with both of them and wanting to stay with them. Donna and Angie felt sad after hearing Annabelle's story, so they decided to keep her with them. They thought, what harm could a 7-year-old girl cause to anyone? However, Donna didn't know that her words would soon prove to be wrong. Angie had a boyfriend, Lou, who sometimes stayed at their apartment. He said he found that doll very strange right from the beginning. He advised Donna and Angie not to keep that doll with them, but they didn't listen. One night, as Lou woke up, he felt that he couldn't move his body. He panicked and heard the laughter of a little girl. When he looked down at his feet, he saw the Annabelle doll, which crept up to his chest and started choking him. Then Lou passed out. When he regained consciousness, he saw that the doll was in Donna's room. One day, while Angie and Lou were sitting, they suddenly heard a loud noise coming from Donna's room. They thought maybe a thief had entered the apartment, but the room was completely empty, except for the Annabelle doll lying on the floor. In that room, Lou heard the laughter of a little girl. It was the same laughter she might have heard in her dreams last night. She felt someone behind her, and when she turned around, there was no one there. Suddenly, Lou felt a sharp pain in her chest, and when she looked down, blood was flowing from her chest. Alarmed, Angie rushed over and saw marks on Lou's body as if someone had scratched her. After this incident, Donna and Angie felt things were getting out of hand, so they sought the help of famous paranormal investigators, Lawrence and Ed Warren. During the investigation, they discovered that it wasn't the spirit of a 7-year-old girl inside that doll but a demon pretending to be a child, with the intention not to seek love but to possess Donna's body. Warren thoroughly inspected the house, and Donna, Angie, and Lou recounted all the incidents they had experienced. After learning everything, Ed and Lauren began to fully investigate the doll. They discovered that there was a demon inside the doll, pretending to be the spirit of a 7-year-old girl named Annabelle, and its purpose was to possess a human body. To prevent anyone else from being troubled because of Annabelle, they took the doll with them and left for home. Ed placed the doll on the back seat of the car. Along the way home, they both felt an eerie unease. Sometimes the car's steering would malfunction, and sometimes the brakes would fail. Not only that, but when they arrived at one point, their car started to tip badly. They both were convinced that all of this was happening because of Annabelle. Stopping the car, they splashed holy water on Annabelle, after which the car started running properly again, and they both safely reached home. In the first few days, they noticed that Annabelle would often end up in another room of the house on her own, sometimes in the hallway, sometimes in the kitchen, and sometimes in her daughter's room. Once, as Lauren sat in the hallway, her gaze drifted towards her daughter's room. She saw her talking to a little girl, while the Annabelle doll sat on the chair next to her. The doll turned its head towards Lauren and stared at her. Suddenly, the door to the room slammed shut loudly, and Lauren rushed towards it, but it was locked. Closing her eyes, Lauren muttered something, and the door opened. When she entered the room, she saw her daughter unconscious, and the Annabelle doll lying on the floor. This frightened her greatly. When her daughter regained consciousness, she explained that she was talking to a girl named Annabelle. Then she suddenly felt dizzy and passed out. Something very strange also happened to her at night. Ed was sleeping in his room when he heard the laughter of a little girl coming from the kitchen. When he came out of his bedroom and reached there, he saw a very small girl sitting with Prince, and she quickly hid behind the curtain when she saw Ed. Ed could only see her shadow behind the curtain, and it seemed to him that in that shadow, the girl had a doll in her hand. As Ed approached the curtain with a water gun in his hand, someone touched his shoulder from behind, causing him to scream. Upon turning around, Lauren saw that she had come to see in the kitchen. When she looked back at the ad, there was no one there. Warren called him the next day to exorcise the doll from the church, and Prince lifted the doll and made fun of it, saying, "You're just a doll, and you can't hurt anyone." In the meantime, the priest said he shouldn't have said that because the ad believed it made him angry. A few hours later, the ad received a call and found out that the priest had narrowly escaped a terrible road accident. After this incident, Warren had a special wooden case made for the ad and kept it in his occult museum. Warren had lived among many strange things all his life, but Annabelle was much more terrifying and frightening than all of them. No matter who the person was, she could hurt them to any extent. That's why Warren locked her away in a wooden locker forever. So, friends, how did you like the story? Be sure to let me know in the comments section. Thank you.